There's a neighborhood in America that doesn't make sense. The streets are laid out at an angle, deliberately offset from the rest of the grid. The architecture is like anything else on the block. And then there's this median running down the center of the main avenue, wider than most city parks. But what was it used for? And if you look at an old map, really look at it, the whole thing is shaped like a plantation being sold off piece by piece and in a hurry, because that's exactly what it is. He meant to build a legacy. He just built the wrong one. But legends say
this entire grid, every street, every house, only exists because a 15-year-old billionaire couldn't stop playing a game of dice.
I'm Jabari Thomas, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, and I find places like this, weird, hidden gems that you can visit. But like everything in life, there's a reason why behind the story. It's free to subscribe. Now, let me introduce you to the teenager, politician, and soldier that introduced the game of craps to the free world. This is one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in America, and it once belonged to Bernard Xavier Philippe de Marigny de Mandeville, born 1785. Even his name couldn't fit on a street sign. At the age of 15, and not even old enough to vote, but he was apparently old enough to lose an entire neighborhood at a card table. It all started when his family sent him to England to get him an education, and he came back with one thing: a dice game called Hazard. In America, it would eventually be known as what we call it today at the casino, craps. And Bernard Marigny spent the rest of his life proving he was very, and I mean very, good at losing it. To pay his debts, he did what any reasonable teenager with a massive plantation would do. He divided up his plantation land into sections and sold it off street by street, block by block, and in doing so, accidentally building one of the most interesting neighborhoods in America.
And you know what? Marigny was so arrogant, he actually named this street after his lifestyle, Craps Street, which is known today as Burgundy. Might I add, not Burgundy, Burgundy.
You know, most city planners named streets after presidents, civil rights leaders, saints. Marigny named his streets after his feelings. There was a Rue des Bons Enfants, Street of the Good Children.
Okay, so this street that I'm walking on right now wasn't always called North Rampart Street. In the early 1800s, it was called Rue de l'Amour, Love Street.
He was essentially writing his diary on cobblestone.
If I was a betting man, and I am, I would say that was probably a brothel. I don't know that for a fact though. Just looked like one.
It's actually an Airbnb now. The neighborhood that Marigny built attracted free people of color, refugees from the Haitian Revolution, Irish and German Catholics, flooding into New Orleans in the 1840s. They needed a church, so they built one on the corner of Burgundy, formerly Crab Street, you'll recall. And they named it St. Peter and Paul. This stunning building was built in 1861, and inside, almost nothing has changed. And right next door is a bar.
So I'm checking out this fabulous historic place. What's really cool, so this was the actual priest office at the time.
Over the years, this church has seen many guests, and now you can stay in one of the oldest churches in New Orleans.
So prior to the pandemic, this was actually a school. Yeah, so they converted the school into a hotel and a restaurant, and the church is now an event hall.
But here's the thing about addiction. While the neighborhood was thriving, the man who built it was bleeding out. Any gambler will tell you the most dangerous part of the night isn't the first loss, it's that chase. When you're down at a table, you don't make safe, small bets to get your money back. You push whatever chips you have right in the center of the table. And for Marigny, his last chips were dirt. So by the time the church was built, Marigny had already sold off most of his plantation. The grand fortune mostly gone. But he had one card left to play. Now this is where this unusually wide median comes into the story. Hoping to revive his neighborhood's land values, Marigny backed a railroad connecting the Mississippi River to Lake Pontchartrain. In 1831, exactly a century before it would close, the Pontchartrain Railroad was born. 5 miles of track down Elysian Fields Avenue made it the third railroad in the U.S. Unlike his dice games, this actually paid off.
So this railroad was designed to connect the Mississippi River, which is down there, to Lake Pontchartrain, which is all the way down there.
Cargo ships from the ocean, they were just too big for the Mississippi, so they had to dock in Lake Pontchartrain. This train hauled their cargo 5 miles into the city. New Orleans essentially had 2 front doors, the river and the lake, and this train connected them. But the ships eventually grew too big, even for the lake. As the cargo business dried up, the Pontchartrain Railroad became something else entirely. The city's party train.
Right now, where I'm walking, used to be the tracks for the Pontchartrain Railroad. It was one of the first railroads in America.
There was a locomotive named Smoky Mary, and folks would ride out to the lakefront restaurants and saloons. This steam engine ran every single day for a whole century. By the 1900s, young jazz musicians like Louis Armstrong rode Smoky Mary to play for the crowds at the lakefront by day before heading back to the city dance halls at night. But something else happened. By the 1920s, automobiles and citywide streetcars made a 5-mile steam locomotive obsolete. On March 15, 1932, Smoky Mary made her final run. The WPA eventually paved over the tracks, and the lakefront port became an amusement park, which is also closed now. This is the only photo that exists of Bernard de Marigny. He lived to be 82 years old. Talk about someone who lived the life. Despite having it all, his death is anything but a happy ending. This median is the ghost of a massive 100-year success that simply aged out. But even with that success, he couldn't outrun his debts. In his final years, he sat on his porch in his nightclothes, writing down his memories. A man who had once owned more of New Orleans than almost anyone, reduced to a notebook full of stories no one asked for. He died nearly broke. Now, local legend says the teenager lost his entire neighborhood in a single night of rolling dice. But the truth, it was a much slower bleed. It wasn't just the casino that broke him. A lifetime of bad bets at the table, mixed with devastating crop failures and a massive economic crash. But Bernard was all but a simple fool. This was the same man who stood at the right hand of power, serving as the principal military aide to Louisiana's governor during the epicenter of the Battle of New Orleans. For decades, even as his fortune was bleeding out, he remained one of the state's most powerful political figures, a respected state senator, a critical delegate who helped shape Louisiana's very constitution. But here's the thing, everything he lost, every bet he blew, every street he sold, every gamble that didn't pay, at the end of the day, became a neighborhood. The most musician-dense square mile in the country, a church that still looks like 1861 inside, a street that still carries the ghost of his worst impulse. He meant to build a legacy. He just built the wrong one. And somehow it's beautiful. While his name may be on these streets, it's the hands and the souls of the enslaved people that he owned who really built this place. Records indicate that at least 153 enslaved people lived and worked there in the mid-1830s. And while they may not be here today, their spirits are still among us. I dedicate this film to them.